Hey y'all, I'm Samah Ali, and I am one of the Associate Shorts Programmers for Nyc. I'm very pleased to lead the Q&A for Nycu's The New School program for this year's festival. We have many directors joining us virtually today. I will ask everybody to introduce themselves as well as the films that they directed. Maliyamungu, let's start off with you.
Hi everybody, I'm Maliyamungu and I directed 9 Days a Week.
Thank you for joining us. Claire.
I'm Claire Haughey and I directed Hidden Costs.
Thanks for being here, Claire. Lillian.
I'm Lillian Xuege and I directed Park Life.
Welcome. And last but certainly not least, Amrit.
Hi there, I'm Amrit Chen and I directed OK Boomer.
Welcome, everybody. So glad to have everyone present. Amrit, I'm actually going to start with you, but this question is for everybody. What inspired your film? Why did you decide to take the camera to what you were seeing?
I think what really inspired me was the people, the subjects, Alex Rodriguez and Marcus Alston. I met them at a time when I was feeling pretty uninspired with my own activism and a little bit just kind of stumped how people younger than me were feeling optimistic and energetic about the world. And I kind of wanted a window into what was fueling other activists. And so I met Alex and Marcus, and both of them just really sparked not just inspiration in me, but like a curiosity of what is driving them, what is keeping them optimistic and energetic about being able to change large systems. And that's what really led me down the path of following them with my camera.
That's so cool, and also great title. Love the title, OK Boomer. Claire, what inspired your film? Very similar with OK Boomer, but different in its own respect.
Yeah, well, I came to the subject kind of in a roundabout way. I was actually doing some research on the Greenpoint oil spill and was interviewing someone about that, and like a local community activist. And she was actually just telling me about a meeting she was having about this pipeline that was going to be constructed through her community the next night. And so I think the way I was introduced to it also is like, it kind of speaks to how I ended up filming, and that I'd done all this research about the industrial history in Brooklyn before I even learned about this fracked gas pipeline that was being constructed through Brooklyn. So I wanted to like tie in present day circumstances to these like cycles of environmental pollution for corporate profit.
It was so wild. While watching your film, I was just like, I used to live in Greenpoint, so all the streets that you were going down, I was like, oh my God, like this was happening right underneath my nose, and I clearly was just in another world, not even thinking about it. Really good job, and thank you for bringing your subject to us. Lillian, what inspired Park Life?
Well, when I first came here, I was like very drawn to Chinatown for obvious reasons, nostalgia reasons, mostly because like the stubbornness it has with its surroundings, and also the livelihood that it preserves. I was especially fascinated about that particular park because it's a senior park in Chinatown that looks so otherworldly with the rest of the New York City. And it's a tourist attraction, so I like see tourists coming there to observe their activities like a cultural spectacle, and so the people themselves are a part of the scene that I think is very interesting.
That's so cool. That is what a voyeuristic sight, and also the pensive look that you held with the camera too is so interesting. Maliyamungu, last but certainly not least, talk to us about the inspiration behind 9 Days a Week.
9 Days a Week came out of my own natural desire to study the work of Black visual artists and Black photographers or videographers. And it was from a class that we have, my cinematography class. We were asked to study the work of New York street photographers. And I happened to find an article about Luis Mendez in the New Yorker that was written in 2016 by a writer called Lucy McKeon. And when I found the article, I actually thought he had passed away. And in my preparation, I found out that he was still alive. And I got his contact, I made him, and meeting him and being able to ask him the questions that I would have usually just like tried to find secondary resource, but I was able to get it primarily. Then we just had such a connection. The first time I met him, I was already filming him because I wanted to bring it to the class. And then that just kind of led me into a new path of wanting to document him and making a film and sharing his story and the things that I was learning with the world.
Wow. I'm glad, firstly, that you got to meet him and it wasn't the sad story that you thought it was going to be. So that's really very good. I want to actually ask all of y'all, and whoever wants to go first, feel free. What was one lesson you learned while making your documentary? Who wants to go first? That's a big question, right? Amrit, I'm going to go with you because it seems like you're being pensive.
All right. I think this was just an exploration. I'm trying to think, like, I was a new filmmaker, so it was a lot of like technical lessons for me. But I think the biggest lesson was just like, you never know where your material is going to come from. I came into the film with a very like, my background in social justice nonprofits, and I was really thinking of it kind of how I would make a nonprofit advocacy film. And along the way, I just realized I really didn't want to do that, and I wanted it to be much more personal. And so I came back to my material and found all these other moments that in the first go of it, I had kind of disregarded or I hadn't thought of as shaping the narrative. And then I think the biggest lesson is you never know where your material is going to come from, or you never know what your whole story is until you kind of sit back with it.
Big lessons, especially with such young subjects too. Lillian, why don't you tell us about some lessons that you learned while making Park Life?
Well, first of all, this is the first short documentary that I've ever made. So I'm not sure if it's a lesson, but it's definitely a dilemma that I faced during the shoot, which was how to look at the subject matters that I shoot, because I feel like, especially for my topic, it's easy to have like a gaze that is similar to the tourist gaze, or like a gaze that only touches the surface of their activities, or even like emphasize the objectivity of that spectacle aspect. So I tried to like blend in more to the scenes and like be there more, so they're familiar with me and almost forget about me. That's one of the lessons that I've learned, although I feel like it's not very successful because they still don't see me as one of them yet. And I think they still see me as an undercover police to this day. Yeah, I think that was the main thing that I learned.
You're funny, Lillian. I'm curious, actually, because we have two folks in the room who this was, their first, real documentary. Claire and Maliyamungu, was this also your first time taking up the camera and making a short doc?
Yes, it was my first short documentary as well.
And Claire?
This is the first time I'd done something on my own. So I'd worked on a doc with a group of friends previously.
Wow, so this is new frontiers. A lot of lessons being learned. Claire, I want to hold it on you. What was a lesson that you learned from Hidden Cost? Obviously, you mentioned that you were doing a report, for another organization, and you decided that this was a story that you wanted to capture all on your own.
I think the biggest thing I learned is just how to, and I think this is true like across the board for documentary filmmaking, but how to adapt to like the unexpected circumstances of what happens, which is obviously like a big deal this year. I hadn't actually collected that much footage by the time that COVID hit. So, you know, some of my interviews are done on Zoom, and COVID's part of the story, so it kind of works, but just trying to adapt to what you don't expect to have happen and make a film that reflects that. I feel like I missed out a little bit on being able to film with some of the communities that are directly impacted by construction. A lot of my footage took place in Greenpoint or East Williamsburg, because that's where I had been previously filming, but this pipeline stretches from, you know, Brownsville through Bushwick, Bedside, and into East Williamsburg. So I'm very grateful to be back here now filming in those communities and working on a second project related to this pipeline. But for the first one, yeah, definitely just learning how to adapt with what you don't expect.
And with documentary filmmaking, it's all about, you know, adapting. It's all about, did we get it on camera? Yes, no, all right, on to the next thing. Maliyamungu, what was one lesson that you learned from 9 days a week?
9 days a week definitely taught me a lot about working with people to make it happen. Because as a director, and because it was a portrait, like I needed to spend a lot of time with Louis, with my subject, and to build intimacy and for him to be comfortable. So the technical aspects of me learning, you know, how to record sound and how to capture the images that I wanted with the camera, it was difficult to maneuver through those aspects without having support, but also it was important for him to spend time with the support that I had, because there was an aspect of performance when someone came into the room that he hadn't met before. So just, you know, finding the rhythm in directing, being behind the camera and audio was difficult. So over time, I started bringing on people that could support that flow. So definitely working with people, which, you know, as I continue to shoot with him, has become easier to maneuver because now I feel like he knows the people that I'm bringing on, and I'm getting better with the equipment and the technicalities of filmmaking.
I hear that. And that's really good to hear, that your character got more comfortable with you towards the later days of your shooting. That's really cool. I want to now transition this conversation to what everyone's working on now. And Claire, I kind of want to start with you because you've mentioned that you are doing something that is very related to the pipeline project.
Yeah, I'm still filming the movement. I mean, I've been filming for close to a year now. And I'm focused more on spending more time with individuals in different communities along the way. And I'm interested in these efforts to sort of bridge the gap between, like as you can see in the film, a lot of the activism is predominantly white. And so efforts to bridge the gap between that sort of front-facing activism and the communities impacted by the pipeline, both as like an environmental hazard and sort of an economic burden, as it like interrupted a lot of businesses, and National Grid is raising folks' rates to pay for it. So that's what I'm working on and filming right now, and it's a little bit more sort of character driven with some amazing activists from Brownsville and East Williamsburg and Bushwick. And yeah, I'm not really sure where the state of the pipeline will be when we're watching these films or when this airs, but I definitely encourage folks to look into it because it's an ongoing thing, and there's still time to change the course of what happens with the pipeline.
I totally hear you on that, 100%. Maliyamungu, what are you working on now?
So I'm currently strategizing how 9 days a week can be a feature. I've continued to film with him since I finished the short, and I'm also in pre-development for a documentary about Congolese jazz music. So that's where I'm at the moment.
I love that. I love Congolese music, so I can't wait to see what you're going to be doing with that. That's so cool.
We should continue the conversation.
Totally. Lillian, what are you working on next?
I'm currently researching for a documentary on Chinese Christianity, especially Chinese churches in New York, because my grandma and my mom are both Chinese Christians, which I think is such a novelty. And also the Christianity has been transformed as a symbol and were demonized and then popularized in China over the years. And I'm also curious about how this symbol sort of takes on new meanings when it integrates in the American setting, like Chinese Christianity in the American setting. So I'm researching about that.
All of y'all have such cool ideas. This is a special room that I'm virtually taking part of. Amrit, end us off. What are you currently working on?
I'm looking for a job. But in terms of films, I've been really thinking about, I've been planning a road trip up in this winter, and I'm trying to figure out what is an exploration of, where the country is going to be during that time, and that could take place in public spaces, and also kind of documenting how people are reassessing like ideas of space and relationships to places, and also to like communal gatherings. It's very like early start of thinking. I'm just trying to think through how I could use the opportunity to be on the road and kind of take a landscape approach to where we are in January 2021.
I feel like the simple thing that I can say to you is just film, because what a historic time we are all living in. And guaranteed there have been people probably since the 2018 election who've been, recording, if anything, maybe even the 2016 election, that have just been recording for like 4 years, 2 years, and so on. And so just pick up the camera. And clearly you have a knack for it with OK Boomer. So I'm excited to see what you're going to come up with this road trip and the cross-country reaction and, experience of what's currently happening in the American zeitgeist. Well, I mean, that's it, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us today. And I also want to thank everybody at home for spending time with us and selecting this shorts program. I hope you enjoy more from our 2020 lineup and have a lovely virtual festival. Thank you all so much for being in the room. It's such a pleasure to talk to y'all today.